All right, this video is going to very briefly introduce one. This is our rhetoric and writing lecture for this week. And so I want to talk a little bit about two things that are really important when writing an essay, and that's how you start your essay, how you get the attention of your reader, and then how you conclude or wrap up or finish your essay. So let's talk about that real quick. And this, again, will be a fairly brief lecture, I think. All right, so there's a lot of ways that you could potentially introduce an essay, and these are just well, we have 7 here that are, I think, useful. Do you have to use one of these for this first essay? No. But if you're a little bit stuck and you're having some trouble kind of getting started with essay number 1, maybe, think about this. Now, another strategy is, just basically get your thesis, a little bit of introductory stuff, and get your thesis on paper, and you can always come back and write your introduction later. So some people struggle with the introduction. Don't get hung up on that. If it's really slowing you down, go ahead and just, put your thesis. And remember we talked about thesis is basically this overarching idea of your paper. And usually for our purposes, for the essays that we're writing, you want that thesis statement to basically say what your topic is and what your opinion or position is on that topic. So again, if this is hanging you up and getting you sort of stuck or blocked, don't worry too much about your introduction now. But by the time we write our second draft, I really want you to go back, and if you don't have a very good introduction, try to use one of these 7 types. Explain why your topic is important. So let readers know why this topic is important to them. And just that could basically be your introduction. This topic is important because provide background information. So this is going to be a very important part of probably what you do with our first essay. You have to give some background information. So in other words, don't assume that the only person reading your essay would be somebody who's read Hills Like White Elephants, even though in this case that is true. It'll be me or another classmate reading this first essay. But try to give a little background information about the story and what part you're focusing on. You can also use an anecdote or a short story to, a personal story to introduce your essay. You can use a quotation, some famous or some well-known or important person, saying something about related, to your topic. You can provide relevant statistics. This is probably not going to work in the kind of essay we're writing, but for some essays, this works really good. 70% of people who believe, and you just basically give us statistics. Statistics are often numbers, percentages, things like that. Find common ground. Think about what your reader, this is easily done, I think, because you know your audience somewhat, that we're all affiliated with Morton College in some way, and from this area in the Midwest and the Chicagoland areas, et cetera, et cetera. So there's ways that you could probably find common ground. Snow shoveling might be something, the next few days, I think. Describe something. Description can add liveliness and interest to your introduction. So a description. Again, let's look at what these actually might look like in an essay. So this one is one providing background information. And it starts out, this is your probably maybe topic sentence for this paragraph. In the late 1990s, President Clinton began an initiative to reduce tobacco use by children. So if you want to read through this, you can. It's an introduction to an essay. And then at the bottom, we have our thesis statement. Clearly, the federal government must devote considerably more money and resources to educating children about tobacco. This is a fairly old essay, but it's actually going back to even older time. And so we're giving background information about what happened in the 1990s in terms of tobacco use and whether that was acceptable or something that people wanted to sort of work against. So again, this is an introduction, an example of one that's using background information. This next one is using a quotation. So you can see the quote right here: "Music is the speech of angels," wrote Thomas Carlyle over 100 years ago. Today, growing numbers of scientists might agree. Soothing music has been shown to lower blood pressure of heart patients, reduce pain, and help premature babies gain weight. So all these positive things about music. So I think this is going to be an essay about music therapy. In fact, research studies show that music has the power to heal and work medical. Here's your thesis. Notice these thesis statements are tending to come at the end of a paragraph. This is a pretty short paragraph. So it starts out with a quotation. Music is the speech of angels. Notice the quotation marks. This is obviously somebody else said this. Thomas Carlyle said it over 100 years ago. And so that's an example of a short introduction, which is fine. And it's using a quotation to get interest in your topic. Here's one using statistics. So you can see 25 million. You just see these numbers that are in bold. And the thesis down here, it's time to reverse the trend and work to increase enrollment, faculty, and staff. So this is from a textbook. This is not about Morton College. This is from a textbook that I used years ago. But it's basically going to be arguing for, the fact that maybe they're doing a lot of renovations, they're building new buildings on this university campus, but they've lost students, they've lost faculty and staff, and so they want to reverse that trend. This is using statistics. We have these numbers here that are getting our interest in the topic. Another thing you can do is tell why your topic is important. I think this is an example of that here. And this is all about advertising that's for especially geared to young people. It talks about because cigarettes are so dangerous, laws prohibit their advertising on television. Unfortunately, a similar ban does not exist for print media. As a result, many people are enticed to begin smoking after viewing the ads that promise everything from pure smoking pleasure to fun, friends, and romance. Teenagers and younger children are particularly vulnerable. So here's our kind of problem, right? Young people, teenagers, younger children see these ads, even with cartoon characters and stuff, and want to start smoking. So while we cannot force national advertisers to stop running magazine ads, we can lobby local officials to ban cigarette advertising on billboards and in our town. So they're basically just advocating for what we can do to try to stop this kind of advertising. And again, I think this is basically explaining why this topic is important. Here's a description. It gives all these sensory images, and then it has a statement down here. Jenny was angry, very angry. This is going to be an essay, a personal essay about Jenny, and she has a lot of anger issues. And so it's talking about her hands flying, her green eyes flashing, spittle spraying. Jenny howled at her younger sister. People walk by gawking at the spectacle as Jenny grunts emanate through the mall. Emma sucks at her thumb, etc. So we have this sort of description of a scene, and then we state, really our thesis is going to be describing Jenny's anger issues in the descriptive essay. So this is specific, kind of a very personal descriptive essay, but it's using description to get the interest before we talk about what our main topic is going to be. This is, telling a story, right? And what you'll notice when somebody tells a story, they set it up in what's called chronological order, meaning time order. So the morning of my job interview, I woke up an hour earlier than usual. And then this goes through, if you want to read this, pause it. With any of these, you can go back. These are just examples of what might be good introductions. It tells a whole story about everything that happened on the morning of this job interview and all the troubles they had that were mainly caused by their garage door not working because the electricity was off at their house. And then the thesis, that's when I knew for sure that modern conveniences could be downright inconvenient. So again, they use what's called a narration or a story, a personal anecdote to kind of set up their thesis. And that's a great way to open a more personal essay. Here's one where they're trying to find common ground. Think back to when you were in high school. Remember the kids who caused all the trouble? The ones who disrupted the teacher and made it difficult for the rest of the class? Now imagine how much more learning would occur if the troublemakers had been allowed to quit school and get jobs. So they're basically trying to say, remember how it was in school? You had this experience, I had this experience, common ground. And then if we abolish compulsory attendance, everyone will be better off. So they're going to argue in this essay to get rid of, making students attend high school. It shouldn't be mandatory or compulsory, according to this. And then they're going to launch into the body of the essay, like all these are intro paragraphs. Thesis is at the end of the first paragraph. That's not required, but it's a good strategy to kind of set up your thesis, state your thesis, and then you'll go into the body and prove it. All right, the other part we want to do is look at conclusion types. Now again, both intros and conclusions, you might not even have a real conclusion on your first draft, so don't worry about that at this point, but later, when you write your second draft, you definitely want to have a conclusion. So here's a few ways you can do that. What's the significance of your main point? Let's go back and make sure I got this right. I want to go back and make sure I didn't miss one of these. Now that I see that again. Um, yeah, I think actually, um, yeah, we did. No, we covered that. Okay, good. Just want to make sure we covered all those. Okay, so for conclusions, significance of the main point, a summary, explaining the consequences, a final point, call to action, or a question. So let's go through these quickly too. This is, again, this would be your last paragraph, kind of wrapping things up. Once again, if you want to be successful as a student, it's necessary at minimum to have a plan of action, be as organized as possible, and do everything in your power to maintain a positive attitude. With these three areas covered, your chances of graduating will increase dramatically. So what we have here is a summary. And the reason it's a summary is because they stated these three kind of main ideas that probably appeared in the body of the essay. So in a summary, you want to go back and remind your reader, these are the three main points I made in the body. This is a good strategy, especially if you're writing a longer essay like a research paper, because sometimes the reader forgets a little bit. If you're writing a very short, just like ours, and even a 500-word essay, summary might not be the best. It's not a bad strategy, but again, just so you know, they work really well with longer pieces of writing. Question. You can ask a rhetorical question. And remember, rhetoric is using language effectively. So a rhetorical question is a question where you don't expect an answer. You just want somebody to think a little bit. So this is at the end of an essay that's written about a flight attendant, and she's struggling with this older man on the flight because she's so worried about him. And he seems so frail and sickly. He's coughing. And this is before COVID, so it's not that she's worried about getting sick. She just really worried. She is at first, I think, but she kind of takes to him throughout the flight. And then at the end of the essay, she asks the question, the rhetorical questions. Who will be there in the airport to meet him? Question mark. What is his home like? Question mark. Who brings him coffee the way he likes it? Question mark. Who is not afraid to touch him? Question mark. And that's the way the essay ends. And it just leaves you kind of thinking. And it's a really effective conclusion in this particular instance because it leaves you with this essay on your mind and it makes you think about this. And so that could be a good strategy for your essay, finishing off with rhetorical question or questions. Okay, so this is the idea of what we might call predicting the consequences or thinking about the future. And it's, notice down here, the last thing, and when youth suffers, the future suffers. So we go back to our choices here, and we have explained the consequences. We explain to the reader what will or will not happen if he or she takes our advice. So we get here, and we're basically, it's an essay that's been arguing for trying to attract better and brighter teachers to the profession of teaching. And it says, without well-qualified teachers, schools are little more than buildings and equipment. If higher-paying careers continue to attract the best and brightest students, there will not only be a shortage of teachers, but the teachers available may not have the best qualifications. Our youth will suffer. And when the youth suffers, the future suffers. So they're predicting the consequences, right? If we don't improve the quality of teachers that we get, our whole future is going to be suffering. And that's predicting the consequences, right? And that's one of our choices. If we look back here, explaining or predicting the consequences. All right. All of us really share the responsibility for the health of our planet. Ignoring the problems will not make them go away. However, focusing our efforts on taking positive steps to protect the environment will make a difference that our children and grandchildren will thank us for. So very subtly, maybe not so subtly, but they're calling on us to take action, to take positive steps. So one thing you can do in your conclusion is you can call your audience to action. You can ask them to do something, to change something, or even to think differently and take that kind of action. And this is, again, what we would call, if we go back to our list here, a call to action. Implore readers to take action or follow a course you suggest. Okay, this one is related to what I would call explaining why your topic is important or significant. So this is, again, remember, we're at the last paragraph of maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs, a couple of pages maybe. And it says, because being cut from the team shattered my self-esteem at such a young age, I've struggled all my life with feelings of inadequacy. I've doubted my ability because the coach, whose judgment I trusted, told me that I didn't have what it takes. So here we have, maybe they wrote a very personal, anecdotal kind of essay, giving lots of information about how they were cut from the basketball team in high school. And then finally, at the end, they're sort of explaining, this is the whole point of my essay. The reason I shared all these stories about being cut from the team is because it affected me so deeply throughout my life. And so that's kind of where they're basically using, if we go back here, the significance of your main point. What were you talking about in this essay? Why did you write about basketball? And this is the reason. And they tell you at the end. The most telling difference between child rearing practices today and those of 50 years ago is that today's parents are less rigid. Unlike the parents of 50 years ago, they're less concerned with doing everything on schedule and by the book. Babies are not forced to eat and sleep at specific times, but may do so when they are hungry and sleepy. Today's parents trust their instincts more than they trust the child care books used by parents of the past. Thus, they are more likely to do what they think is right and not worry about what authorities say. We go back to our choices here. This to me seems like a final point. One last powerful point. So they were probably writing an essay all about child rearing practices, raising children, how that's changed. And they give this last point, which is basically saying the most important or significant or telling difference is this. And they state that. And that's what, you just have this one really nice final point. You didn't want to put it in the body. You don't really have a good way to conclude maybe. So you just use this final point as your conclusion, and that would be the end of the essay. And that would be the end of our presentation. So hope you got something out of this. Feel free to send me an email, or if you need other suggestions or anything for how to write introductions and conclusions, let me know. As we go through the semester, obviously you're going to get several chances to practice this. And as always, if you have any questions, send me an email or visit my office hours, and I hope to talk with you soon.